A lot of people listening today want to help someone they love, a partner who's stuck, a child who's struggling, a friend facing a change they're afraid of. So we do what feels natural. We point out the problem. We offer solutions. We do everything we can to help them see what's wrong so they'll fix it. And research shows that's almost always the wrong move. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Silard, and welcome to ReSocial, where we reflect on, rediscover, and renew how we approach social relationships so we can develop CMSRs, compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships. I'm joined by Dr. Richard Boyatzis, an expert in emotional intelligence and behavior change, and we're talking about what the neuroscience of change reveals about the only way to actually help the people we love. Today, we're diving into the positive emotional attractor and why compassion isn't soft at all, but actually the most direct path to opening people up to learning and growth. Dr. Richard Boyatzis, welcome to ReSocial. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I call Richard King Richard because if you're in academia, everyone knows him. Wherever he goes, everything stops, and he ends up chairing the whole session, and everyone stops and pays attention because it's an extremely wise man. Richard, it's wonderful to have you with us. Let's take a look at what happens when our relationships are not as meaningful as we want them to be. And I want to bring that up because you've traced the roots of disconnection back to the 1970s, the breakdown of extended family, the rise of television, and then the digital age. Can you sketch that arc for us? What did we lose at each
Sure.
step, and how did each loss make the next one worse? I particularly think a lot of our listeners, from the feedback I've received from them, are really suffering from the feelings of disconnection today in our
Yeah.
age of distraction. So if you could put a little context behind it,
Okay.
even half a century ago, you were pointing out disconnection in the United States, and it's only gotten worse. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but we'd love to hear your perspective on how you see this trajectory toward disconnection.
All you have to do is spend time in any of the Southern European countries versus the Northern European countries. All you have to do is spend time in what I would call more relational cultures versus more individualistic cultures, and you start to see it. So the idea that people would move away for a better job is assumed in the United States, in Canada, and I think still in the UK, less so in Spain, Italia, Greece, Portugal, even Turkey. So one of the issues, and actually The Economist had a cover story in late January called The Relationship Recession. And what they basically talked about is the current state is our relationships are really suffering. And part of what's causing them to suffer is we have all this digital stuff that makes us think we're interacting with other people. We're not. We're interacting with a screen, and Facebook friends aren't unless you're interacting with them. Now, COVID, a once a century event, did a couple things that were, if you lost somebody to COVID, it was really sad. But I remember saying, even by the summer of 20, the biggest consequence of this pandemic was going to be mental and emotional illness. And that's what we've seen. As soon as people got into, by April of 2020, any neuroses you had was amped up because we were all afraid. We didn't know how this thing was transmitted. We didn't know if we'd all die. The uncertainty and the fear was huge. So you take an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear, any neuroses you had was amped up, and then people stayed home and they were not interacting with other people. We, especially in the United States, we destroyed the ability of an entire generation of children to learn that they may or may not be rebuilding now because we kept them out of schools. And in the process, what we did was exaggerated the degree of social isolation. And then people started saying, my job kind of sucked anyway. And yeah, it's nice to be able to work sitting in my pajamas and I don't have to commute. So now we come out of the pandemic and people are saying, I don't want to go to work. Well, one thing that going to work often did is it meant you chatted with other people. I remember saying to, Ellen Van Osten and Melvin Smith, two of my closest faculty colleagues at Case, what I missed during those years the most was the ch- the 20, 30-second chats in the hallway where you'd feel connected. You'd check in on each other's lives and families and things like that. That was huge. So, so here we come out of it. People are still hesitant. And then we've got this ramping up of narcissism, which has happened in so many of our societies. I mean, as I said in our 2019 book, when did the selfie become the most popular form of photography? So you add ramping up of this neuroses, narcissism, with feeling scared about the future and uncertain, and you get social isolation. It was fascinating to realize that a series of studies were done showing that if you were hospitalized for COVID or have long COVID, you had deterioration in the density of your gray and white matter in a region of the brain, in several regions of the brain, but one in particular is near the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, which is, actually it's back here underneath the prefrontal cortex. But Naomi Eisenberger had shown that that was the key to the stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the only thing that alleviates the damages of stress, the cognitive and emotional and perceptual impairment from any form of stress. But it also is at the heart of where we build relationships and interact with others. So here we have a deterioration in the cell matter in a part of the brain that enables us to do this stuff. Meanwhile, we're remote. Now, the good news is we can rebuild it. We understand that neurogenesis can occur, but you have to be interacting with others if you're going to rebuild that part of the brain. We showed in one of our fMRI studies that having coaches with random assignment to different conditions and all that, if you had somebody write a personal vision for an hour versus talk about it for 2 half-hour sessions with a coach, that the 2 talking sessions with a real coach face to face, this wasn't virtual, ended up activating this ventral medial prefrontal cortex really strongly in an fMRI 3 to 5 days later. Whereas writing it didn't even have a significant glitch on it. So it becomes very clear. It's the interpersonal context that we have that's vital so much. I mean, in science terms, I remember saying to folks, it's your relationships that mediate every individual characteristic you have to enable you to become effective or innovative. Just having those characteristics doesn't mean it'll happen. It's like the issue of leadership. Leadership is about relationships. It's not about strategic plans. It's not about budgets. It's not about decision making. It's about relationships. And if you're an effective leader, you build better relationships. And we've got about 60 studies now showing the relationships that predict leadership effectiveness, engagement, organizational citizenship, and innovation are ones that have shared vision, not goals, big picture, sense of purpose, shared compassion, they care for each other, and a shared sense of energy. So all of a sudden, and a doctoral student of mine who just finished her thesis, Maria Volkova-Fedek, showed that the greatest predictor of physician burnout was deterioration in these qualities of their relationships. So meanwhile, as she said at her thesis defense in January, here everybody's saying to surgeons, meditate more, do yoga. Well, the problem is that helps in some ways, but it doesn't help with the relationships.
Yeah. So if you're going to meditate or do yoga, you need to leave your house or apartment and go do it with other people, right?
At the minimum, but what's better is
them, right?
you do that. That's right. You do that, but then go out for coffee afterwards or green tea.
I remember, Richard, when I saw Aaron Beck, one of the fathers of cognitive psychology, positive psychology. I saw him speak at the American Psychological Association conferences in Washington, D.C. And he was 94 and he was receiving this Lifetime Achievement Award. And so he was asked by one of the audience members, so what have you found difficult? How has things changed for you? And so the eternally positive Beck, he said, well, I have a group of friends, and we've been playing tennis together for over half a century. Like we all come together and play. And now, those of us who are still alive, we actually really can't play tennis anymore. So instead, we just sit around at the club and talk with each other. And I realize that they're very interesting people. And actually, there's an enjoyment that I get from that. I never had that before because we would just focus on playing tennis. I have a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to be right back here with Dr. Richard Boyatzis. Don't go anywhere.
Is there a protective shell around your heart holding you back from the connection you know is possible in your life? It's time to find your path to redemption. Introducing Love and Suffering by Dr. Anthony Silard. In Love and Suffering, which has received 4 book awards in psychology and mental health and 99% 5-star reviews on Amazon, Dr. Silard overturns what we've been told over a lifetime about love, forgiveness, acceptance, and gratitude. New York Times bestselling author Adam Alter calls Love and Suffering a compelling roadmap for a more connected and meaningful life. When you order Love and Suffering, 100% of the author's proceeds are donated to nonprofit education programs in Africa and Latin America. Invite more love into your life today. Love and Suffering by Anthony Silard is available now at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. What if everything you've been taught about happiness and friendship is wrong? The artoflivingfree.org, the learning platform of the Center for Social Leadership, would like to offer you 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard: The Myth of Friendship, How Your Misunderstandings About Friendship Keep You Lonely, and The Myth of Happiness, How Your Definition of Happiness Creates Your Unhappiness. Get your free personal copies of The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness today. It's simple and easy. Go to theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books and enter your email, then confirm the confirmation email in your inbox. You'll receive the links to download The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness. Enjoy your 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard today at theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books.
Hello, and welcome back to ReSocial. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Silard. I'm here with Dr. Richard Boyatzis, really one of my idols in this field of relationship psychology. So, Richard, you've talked a bit about disconnection, about remote work, and clearly there are some gains from remote work, right? Flexibility, efficiency. Instead of living in a high rent or high cost area, you can live further from the city center. There's less commute time. But something essential has disappeared, as you mentioned, when those hallway conversations vanish. I'm working on a study with Dr. Archana Tzadon on remote work and loneliness. And one thing we're finding, if we've surveyed a few hundred people already, is that people definitely are feeling lonelier. Not every single person, but on generally people that are remote working are feeling lonelier. But yet they're still choosing remote work because of the efficiencies, because of saving a lot of money that way. And from what we're gathering is that it's like an economic versus social decision as part of it, is that people are choosing efficiency and saving money over the socialization they need to keep loneliness at bay. It also is somewhat of a short-termism decision. It's like focusing on money now, but then not realizing how is this going to affect me in the long term. I wonder, with your own research, why do you think people are choosing remote work even though it's clearly having all of these negative social outcomes on them?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it's money as much as convenience. For example, as you know, I do a lot of research around coaching, both as a process, so managers and executives coaching others, as well as parents, physicians. Now, in coaching, for example, a professional coach could see maybe 2 clients a day because he or she would have to, or they would have to drive or fly to someplace, have their session, and then return. Today, because they can do it over Zoom, most professional coaches are able to see 5 or 6 clients in a day. Now, that helps them because they see more clients, they feel more productive. I believe the clients are getting more. So you could make the argument that it's more convenient. The problem is, I'm not sure by the time you get to the 5th coaching session in a day that you're as sensitive to the other person. You're getting a bit tired and overwhelmed. Also, there's a health benefit. I mean, in July of 2020, I had my physical, and my primary care physician, my internist, said, my God, it was the first time in literally 40 years that my blood pressure was exactly normal. And that's including with all my meds, because even the meds could barely get me down to 1,495.
What caused that? How did you do it?
I wasn't getting on planes every week.
Mm. Less
Now,
stress.
2014, we moved back to the Boston area, and I live in a national park on the ocean. Right outside my window there is the Atlantic Ocean, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and you hear the
Mm.
seagulls and all the birds. It's phenomenal to be in nature. But my teaching once a month would be in Cleveland, or I'd be getting on planes to go to conferences or to give speeches various places or research meetings.
So it seems like you're pointing to a threshold effect where if you look, for example, at the research on business trips and well-being, generally people like to go on business trips because they get out of their role of being a parent and a spouse
Right.
or whatever they have in their normal family milieu, and they get to go and experiment with other parts of their identity and meet other people and so forth. But what I hear you saying is that research ought to look at how often they're going on these business trips, because maybe
Yes.
that's true if it's once in a while, but
So
if you're doing it all the time, it's a different story.
So if I add to this notion of convenience, which could have financial implications, but it's convenience that's, I think, the driving issue. This makes life easier. Let me add your concept, which I would use, dosage.
Mm-hmm.
We published a series of studies in a paper 3 years ago, Dan Goleman and Diane Dar and a few others and I, in which we had been showing how activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which we're calling renewal, hormonal system, nervous system, really helps. And the more you do it in any given week versus stress, and the stress we're talking about is not acute stress like COVID or you get diagnosed with cancer. We're talking about mild stress. Your cell phone drops a call, things are annoying, but mild stress is still causing impairment. Stress is useful. The sympathetic nervous system is useful, but it's not good for you. It causes cognitive impairment, emotional impairment, and perceptual impairment. So the only antidote is to activate this other system that's somewhat antagonistic. And that's why you can do it through yoga and meditation, but you also do it through being in loving relationships. You do it through helping people less fortunate. You do it through playing with people and having fun. You do it with playing music, not listening to it, but I'm actually playing. So the idea is how often, and what we were able to show was that what you really want to do in any given day is have multiple moments of these 15-minute bursts of renewal. You don't want to take an hour and a half off at lunch. It's better to have 15 minutes spread throughout the day. And we also showed, not exactly to my surprise, but empirically it was surprising how strong it was, that the variety of things you did really mattered. Yeah.
Richard and I have been friends for a long, long time. And I remember one time when I was doing my doctorate in Barcelona, you and I had a conversation about how your wife would reinforce for you when you're taking breaks during your workday, you shouldn't go online. You should be doing something that's
Right.
more real time with others. And so it sounds like that's had a really positive effect on you, these micro doses of interaction.
Yeah. And it varies. I mean, she's the one who got me into getting back to my music. So after 60 years of being away from it, I'm now back learning jazz guitar. I mean, I've taken 2 years of courses from Berkeley, and I have a faculty member who does instructions. Yeah. So, like for the half hour before I got on for this interview, I was practicing.
This reminds me of, Richard, is that I love to sing, right? So I go to karaoke bars, and I have a friend who plays guitar. So we get together once a week or every week or two, and I sing with him, sing with a band sometimes. And I've gone to karaoke bars where people really don't interact much, and I don't tend to go back
Yeah.
because it's not just the singing, but it's also singing with people and talking with
Yeah.
each other. Oh, the way you did My Way was fantastic. Yeah, you really got Sinatra's voice pegged. And it creates something to bond over, right? And so
It's through
it sounds
emotional
like,
contagion. Going back to the neuroscience, we now know since about 2000 that parts of the human brain stimulate the same parts of the human brain in people around you. And that's brain-to-brain communication. It happens in 8 to 40 thousandths of a second, deeply unconscious. And it's not the stuff of Star Trek and Betazoid empaths. This is human. And the only time people can't do it is if they're on the spectrum. People on the autism spectrum seem to have a dysfunction in the default mode network. But for almost all the rest of us, we're picking that up. And that's what you're talking about, Tony. It's the positive emotional contagion that you have when you're with others, whether the others are in the band or the group or there's an audience.
I appreciate all the wisdom you're sharing with our listeners. I want to go back to a little bit about loneliness. You really write about that the antidote to loneliness is not more interactions, it's better interactions, right? Shared purpose and genuine care are what create resonant relationships, like the resonant relationship that you and I fortunately have. And those relationships are the basis for everything else. Now, I want to share with you when I was in Barcelona and I reached out to you, and we're talking about, what was that, over 15 years ago? When we first connected, is because I read your research about coaches or leaders when they express compassion toward the people they're coaching, or for leaders toward their employees. You had this really counterintuitive finding. You imagine these leaders who are so busy and now they're going to stop and really listen to someone and be compassionate for 10 minutes. Think, isn't that just going to make them more stressed out because they've got so many more other things they have to do? Well, no, Richard found that it's the opposite. They actually feel less stressed. So, Richard, why is being compassionate toward others not just nice to do, but need to do if you want to live a fulfilling life?
Anthony, let me do this by asking your listeners to do a brief exercise.
Sure.
We won't take the time for it, but I'll just give the instructions. If you want more reflection time while you're listening to this, hit the pause button, think about it, and then come back. So here's the question. Think about the people in your life that have helped you become who you are the most. So as you think about your whole life, not just work, who has helped you become who you are? Who are the people that have helped you the most? And just think about that. Think about 3 to 5 people, maybe more. Then think about the first person you thought of and remember a moment with them in which you learned something important. And just write a few notes so you're replaying a video of a moment like a YouTube video in your head. And see if you can do that for the next few people. Again, normally I would then pause for a few minutes and let people do this. And then when I'm doing these sessions live, I have people turn to a person next to them and share a story. And the question then is, if you've done it, if you haven't done the exercise, you're thinking about this analytically and you're laying judgments on it, it's not going to work. But if you actually do it, and I've done this on all 7 continents, yes, including Antarctica, in about 75 countries. It doesn't matter whether you're in Astana, Kazakhstan, or Milano. So the interesting issue is everybody around the world says when they do that, they feel this real surge of gratitude, of love, of somebody valued them, somebody saw them. They feel blessed. Very often they talk about feeling energized. If they talk about feeling nostalgic or sad, it's because the person has passed away and they miss them. And when they have the conversation in a live session with somebody, they're amazed as to how similar their experiences are to people they've never met. I make the point that those feelings are at the heart of the somatic experience of renewal, of parasympathetic activation. And we don't typically understand that. We confuse it with relaxation and rest and boredom and all that. But the other issue is, I then ask people, even half an hour later, how was thinking about these moments that happened anywhere from 10, 20, 40, 60 years ago, how does it make you feel? And the fact that people report feeling great, feeling loved, feeling a part of something is very telling. So then I ask the analytic question, isn't it interesting that when we did the studies where we interviewed people about these moments, we started doing this in 2000 and we did a series of them, 85% of the stories come back that they're stories in which the person talked about possibilities and pulled what I call the positive emotional attractor, which is more about compassion and hope, more about being open to new ideas and possibilities, not the opposite. And we were able to leverage that into a series of hormonal studies to show, again, that these moments of talking with another person have this similar impact when you recall these key moments in the past in which you had a resonant moment with someone else. That's the power of it. And to answer your original question, it's not just the power at the moment, it's the fact that it has a sustaining effect on you. And that's the key to learning and change, that these relationships aren't just one-off moments. It's not like finding a date for Friday night. It's finding somebody that you love being with.
So, Richard, I have to say, I just love the exercise that you shared with our listeners. I think it will enable them to really simulate and experience what does it feel like to be in a long-term close relationship with another human being. Hello, I'm Anthony Silard, and thank you for tuning in to ReSocial. I'd like to ask you a question and a favor. First, the question: would you like to leave some feedback and let us know what you've enjoyed about ReSocial and also what can be improved? Also, feel free to let us know about any kind of episodes that you'd like to have on ReSocial, any issues you'd like us to address. If you'd like to leave any feedback, please leave it at resocial@theartoflivingfree.org. Once again, resocial@theartoflivingfree.org. Now for the favor, please subscribe or follow. That really helps us to get top tier guests. So you're subscribing or following us at ReSocial makes a big difference. Also, I'd like to thank the ReSocial team, Madeline McLeod, our senior producer, Michele Bordone, our associate producer, and Ariane Escobar, our director of media relations. Let's end the way we always do. Until we meet again, please remember that between you and the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships you desire in your life, lies an invisible social barrier you construct in your mind. It's entirely up to you to push through this barrier and watch it disappear into the mist. Be the change you desire and reach out to another person. Then use the tools you learn, refine, and align with your own values in ReSocial to develop a CMSR. Be kind, be generous, and be caring. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard. Thank you for joining us on ReSocial. I'm looking forward to being together with you again next week in the world filled with CMSRs we are creating together.